The old man raises his eyes from the tea, cooling in his trembling hands, and stares at the camera installed high on the wall. There is no surprise on his face, just a deep sadness that seems to carry decades. His son, on the other side of the screen, feels his chest tighten as he hears his father's low voice echoing through the monitor. If you still need to see, it's because you never learned to look. Before we dive into this story, leave your comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us which city you're joining us from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. The dry click of the lens, rotating in the hallway, shatters the morning silence like a bone breaking. The blue light of the newly installed camera blinks timidly, reflecting on the waxed floor that shines like a mirror. Outside, the gardener cuts the grass with slow movements, oblivious to the drama unfolding inside the three-story mansion that stands in an upscale neighborhood of the city like a monument to loneliness. Richard Miller adjusts his Italian tie in front of the state-of-the-art monitor, trying to hide the unease that beats in his chest like a drum out of rhythm. The office where he sits is an extension of his personality. Everything impeccable, organized, controlled. Mahogany bookshelves, house economics and management books he has read and reread, always seeking the next strategy, the next move that would keep him ahead in the relentless game of business. At 42, heir to a financial empire worth more than entire small towns, he built his reputation on pillars of efficiency and absolute control. His decisions move millions. His meetings define the destinies of hundreds of employees. His investments can make or break careers. But now, for the first time in his life, Richard finds himself facing something he cannot control through spreadsheets or reports. His own father. "It's just a precaution," he murmurs to himself. But his voice sounds hollow in the wood-paneled office. The words echo among the framed diplomas on the wall, among the Entrepreneur of the Year trophies, among photographs of him greeting politicians and celebrities. All this paraphernalia of success seems to mock him now, as he finds himself reduced to spying on the man who gave him life. The truth is, Richard hasn't slept properly in weeks. Since he started noticing small changes in his father's behavior, a growing anxiety settled in his chest like dense fog. Anthony Miller would forget names, repeat stories, sometimes stand still in the middle of the hallway as if he didn't know where to go. Or at least that's what Richard thought he was seeing. Anthony Miller, at 77 years old, walks down the same hallway he has traversed for over 3 decades, with steps that no longer have the firmness of yesteryear. He's an elegant man, even in old age, always impeccably dressed in suits custom-made in London during the company's golden age. His hands tremble slightly as he leans against the marble wall, and every now and then he stops to breathe, as if each movement costs an immense effort that needs to be calculated and planned. His white hair is always neatly combed, a legacy from the days when he commanded board meetings and closed million-dollar deals with the same ease with which other men sign rental agreements. He was known in the business world as the strategist, someone capable of seeing 3 moves ahead in any negotiation, of transforming bankrupt companies into money-making machines, of building a financial empire starting from a small fabric shop he inherited from his own father. But that was before his wife's illness, before the years of fighting a cancer that consumed not only Helen's life, but also part of Anthony's soul, before Richard became a man obsessed with control and distant from any display of affection. The house echoes with silence in every corner. It's a mansion too large for 2 people, with hallways that seem to stretch into eternity and rooms that smell of loneliness and beeswax. The antique furniture, much of it inherited from past generations, holds stories no one remembers telling anymore. French silk curtains filter the sunlight in golden tones, creating an atmosphere that should be welcoming, but instead seems enveloped in melancholy. The portraits on the wall observe everything with eyes that have seen better days. Family photos from when they were still a real family, before the mother left, before money created distances that didn't exist, Before work became the only language father and son could speak to each other. There are photos of birthdays where everyone truly laughed, of family trips when Richard was still a child, running through the corridors of this same house, of Christmases where the table was filled with relatives who now lived their own dramas in other cities. Richard observes through multiple screens as his father walks to the kitchen with that careful step he developed after 70. The kitchen, the pulsating heart of the house, still holds the scent of cinnamon and coffee that has always characterized it. It is the absolute domain of Mrs. Celia Smith, the housekeeper who has worked there for over 20 years and knows the tastes and habits of each resident better than they do themselves. Mrs. Celia Smith is a woman with grey hair, always tied in an impeccable bun, hands calloused from work but delicate in dealing with people. She arrived at the house still young, a recent widow with a small daughter to raise. Anthony and Helen welcomed her not just as an employee, but almost as family. It was she who took care of Richard when his parents had to travel for work, who comforted him on nights when he had nightmares, who taught him his first steps in the kitchen and the value of being grateful for every meal. Now, Mrs. Celia treats Anthony with the affection of a mother genuinely concerned about a child's well-being. It is she who reminds him of medicine times, who prepares specific teas for each moment of the day, who notices when he is more melancholic and discreetly puts his favorite dish on the dinner table. The one that always made him smile. "Did you sleep well?" Mrs. Celia asks, drying her hands on the embroidered apron she has worn for years, a gift from Helen during their last Christmases together. "Like a baby, Celia. And you, my dear, how is your granddaughter?" Anthony's voice carries genuine affection, real interest in the life of the woman who cares for him with such dedication. Oh, Anthony, the girl is a marvel. She's already in her second year of college, doing very well in her studies. She wants to be a doctor, imagine that. Mrs. Celia's eyes sparkle with the pride of a doting grandmother. A doctor! How wonderful. Helen would be proud to know that Celia's family is growing and prospering like this. The conversation flows naturally, warmly, impermeated by an intimacy that comes from years of living under the same roof and sharing the small dramas and joys of everyday life. Through the screen, Richard notices something that deeply bothers him. He hasn't had such a conversation with his father in years, perhaps decades. When was the last time he asked about the old man's dreams, about his worries, about the small joys he can still find in life? When was the last time they sat at the table without rushing, without a cell phone vibrating every 5 minutes, without documents scattered waiting for a signature, without his mind divided between the conversation and upcoming appointments? Richard tries to remember and cannot. This discovery hits him like a punch to the gut. The day follows its normal course, but now Richard pays attention to details that previously went unnoticed. Anthony reads the newspaper on the porch, but he doesn't just read. He stops at certain news items, shakes his head in disapproval at some, smiles discreetly at others. He feeds the great kiskadis that come to perch on the windowsill, always at 9 in the morning sharp, as if they had a tacit agreement of punctuality. There's a general kiskadee that always appears first, followed by 2 thrushes, Bonnie and Clyde, because they always appear together and are the smartest at grabbing the best crumbs. Then a family of sparrows, the gang, arrive in a flock making a terrible racket. Anthony knows each one, having given them nicknames he never told anyone. Occasionally, the old man dozes in the leather armchair that belonged to his wife. The same one where Helen used to read French novels on Sunday afternoons. Even in his sleep, Anthony's hand sometimes reaches out to the side, as if searching for her presence, as if his body still hasn't fully accepted that she has been gone for almost a decade. Richard alternates between observing the screens and pretending to work on the reports accumulating on his desk, but his mind is completely divided. Every gesture of his father takes on exaggerated meaning. Every pause becomes a cause for concern. Every movement is analyzed as if it contained clues about the mental state of the man he barely truly knows. Dad is indeed confused, he justifies to himself when he sees his father looking for the glasses that are on his own head, or when he observes him staring out the window for long minutes as if waiting for someone who never arrives. Sometimes he forgets employees' names. It's normal to monitor someone in these conditions. It's a son's responsibility. But deep in his heart, where the most uncomfortable truths hide, Richard knows that his father's confusion is sporadic and not much different from the lapses anyone his age would have. Most of the time, the old man is lucid, even sharp, capable of deep conversations about politics, economics, and life. What truly bothers the son is something else, something he cannot name, a feeling that has haunted him since he installed the cameras and began this surveillance that feels more like a violation with each passing day. It's the way his father looks at him when they meet for sporadic dinners. There is no disapproval in his eyes, but neither is there pride. It's a gaze that seems to see through him, that sees things Richard would prefer to keep hidden deep in his soul. It's the gaze of someone who knows his secrets even before they are formed, of someone who perceives the hidden motivations behind every supposedly innocent gesture. As afternoon arrives, painting the house with golden tones that enter through the tall windows and create patterns of light on the walls, something happens that makes Richard lean closer to the screen, his heart accelerating for no apparent reason. Anthony rises from the armchair where he was napping, looks around as if searching for something specific, and then heads to the main hall with more determined steps than Richard has seen him take in weeks. The main hall is the most solemn room in the house, with a high ceiling, crystal chandeliers that came from Europe, and furniture that has belonged to the family for generations. But what dominates the room is the portrait of his wife, an oil painting commissioned when Helen was still healthy, when her eyes sparkled with the joy of someone who had her whole life ahead of her. In the painting, Helen smiles with that expression that mixed sweetness and mischief, which made anyone feel welcome in her presence. She was a woman who turned a simple meal into a feast, who could make children stop crying just with her soft voice, who had the rare gift of making everyone feel special when she spoke to them. His father stops before the portrait and stands there for long minutes, just looking. His hands are clasped behind his back, his shoulders slightly stooped by the weight of years and longing. Then, something happens that makes Richard's heart race and his breath catch in his throat. His father begins to murmur something inaudible to the portrait, as if Helen could hear him, as if she were present in that room. Richard turns up the audio volume to maximum, but he cannot understand the words. It seems like an intimate conversation, the kind husbands have with wives after decades of living together, when they don't need many words to understand each other. The son feels a tightness in his throat, a mixture of genuine concern and something deeper, something he doesn't want to acknowledge because it would involve admitting his own loneliness, his own inability for true human connection. When Anthony finally steps away from the portrait, his eyes are moist with tears that he makes no attempt to hide. He wipes the tears with the back of his hand, a delicate gesture that breaks any pretense that he is just a confused old man lost in senile fantasies. There stands a man who still loves deeply, who still feels intensely, who still carries emotional scars that have never fully healed and perhaps never will. It is a love that transcends death, that refuses to accept absence as the end of the story. It is the kind of love Richard has never had with anyone, perhaps doesn't even know how to build, which he now observes through a cold screen like someone watching exotic creatures in a zoo, with equal parts fascination and incomprehension. That night, at dinner in the formal dining room with its table for 12, but occupied by only 2, Richard tries to appear natural, but the tension vibrates in the air like electricity before a storm. Mrs. Celia served the master's favorite dish, Grilled fish fillet with vegetables, a recipe Helen had personally taught her in the early years of marriage. But neither father nor son seemed to have an appetite. They eat in silence for a few minutes that feel like hours, only the clinking of silver cutlery echoing through the dining room. The lit candles in the center of the table create dancing shadows that seem to amplify the mutual discomfort, the feeling that there are white elephants occupying all the empty chairs around the table. "Father, are you all right?" The question escapes before Richard can think better, before he can calculate the consequences or prepare a more subtle approach. Anthony slowly raises his eyes from his plate, as if waking from a deep dream, and there is something different in his gaze. An intensity that hadn't been there for months, a presence that seems to occupy the entire space of the room. "Why do you ask, my son?" The question is simple, but layered. Richard feels he's being tested, evaluated, as if his every word were weighed on invisible scales. "I don't know, you seem distant lately, worried about something." His father chews slowly, as if savoring not just the food, but also the words he is about to say. "There are things one doesn't see even when they are right before one's eyes," he finally replies. The sentence hangs in the air like smoke. Richard doesn't know what to say, so he resumes eating, but the taste of the food has turned to ash in his mouth. That sentence will haunt him for days, echoing in his mind whenever he looks at the screens, whenever he watches his father through the cold lenses he installed throughout the house. When they say goodnight, Richard notices that his father observes him for a moment longer than usual. It is not a look of suspicion, but of knowledge, as if he knows things his son himself does not yet understand. 3 in the morning. The digital clock display cuts through the darkness of the office like a blue blade. Richard should be sleeping, but sleep has eluded him since he installed the surveillance system. Now, like every night, he finds himself before the monitors, watching the silent house through electronic eyes. The house sleeps, but he does not. Every amplified sound from the sensitive microphones makes him jump. The creak of wood settling, the wind hitting a poorly closed window, the refrigerator compressor turning on downstairs. Sounds that had always existed, but which now gained weight, meaning as if each carried a secret message. That's when it happened. A movement on the main hallway screen made Richard lean forward, his heart pounding. Anthony was walking down the hallway, barefoot, wearing only the cotton pajamas he had worn for years. His steps were silent, almost ghostly in the bluish light filtering through the windows. "What is he doing awake?" Richard whispers to himself. His father heads to the office, the same office where Richard now watches, surrounded by screens. On the recording, Anthony turns on only a small lamp, creating an island of yellow light amidst the darkness. Then he does something that leaves Richard breathless. He goes directly to a specific drawer of the century-old desk. But it's not just any drawer. Richard has known that desk since childhood. It was his mother's, then passed to his father when she died. And the drawer Anthony opens shouldn't exist, at least not that Richard knew. The old man presses a specific spot on the mahogany, and a secret drawer reveals itself, sliding silently. From inside, he takes out an envelope yellowed by time, so old it looks like it will fall apart at the touch. His trembling hands hold the envelope as if it were made of crystal, with a delicacy Richard rarely saw in his father. Anthony doesn't open the envelope. He just holds it for a few moments, as if its weight told a complete story. Then, something extraordinary happens. For the first time in months, Richard sees genuine relief on his father's face, almost tenderness, as if that envelope held something too precious for words. After a few minutes that felt like hours, his father places the envelope back in the secret drawer, which closes with an almost inaudible click. He turns off the light. and returns to his room, leaving Richard with more questions than answers. The rest of the night is pure insomnia. Richard keeps staring at the screen of the empty office, wondering what could be in that envelope. Important documents, money, letters from his mother? Curiosity grows within him like a fever, consuming any possibility of rest. When the sun finally rises, painting the house with soft golden tones, Richard makes a decision that will change everything. He will find out what is in that envelope. He waits for Anthony to leave for his morning walk, a routine the old man has religiously maintained for decades. And then, with his heart pounding like a hammer, Richard heads to the office. The desk seems larger in real life than through the screens. His hands tremble as he searches for the secret mechanism he saw his father use. He presses, he feels around, he tries different combinations until finally he hears the magic click. The drawer opens like a mouth revealing secrets. The envelope is there, exactly where his father left it. Richard picks it up with excessive care, feeling the rough texture of the aged paper. His hands sweat as he ponders whether or not he should open something that is clearly not for his eyes. Curiosity wins. Inside the envelope there are only two things, an old photograph and a handwritten note. The photo makes him swallow hard. It's him, Richard, but as a child, perhaps 7 or 8 years old. He's sitting on his mother's lap in the garden of the house, both smiling at the camera with a happiness that seems to come from another world. It's a photo he doesn't remember seeing before, but it awakens dormant memories like flowers blooming after rain. But it's the note on the back that shatters him. Written in his mother's unmistakable handwriting, in ink that time had faded but not completely erased. "What I gave you never fit what you desired." The words hit him like punches. Richard sits heavily in his father's chair, the photo trembling in his hands. The phrase echoes in his mind, gaining new meanings. With each repetition, it's as if his mother were there, speaking directly to him across time. What did she mean? What love did she offer that he didn't know how to accept? What expectations did he create that she couldn't fulfill? Or is the message for his father, about the son they had, about the man Richard became? Guilt settles in his chest like a stone. He puts the photo and the note back in the envelope, puts everything back in the secret drawer, but the damage is done. His mother's words will follow him for days, like restless ghosts. When Anthony returns from his walk, Richard is pretending to work on the computer, but his hands tremble over the keyboard. His father enters the office to get a book, and for a moment their gazes meet. "Did you sleep well, my son?" "Yes, father." "And you?" "As always." There's a pause, and then, "Some dreams are too heavy for just one night." Richard wonders if his father knows, if he noticed that someone had tampered with his secrets. But Anthony just takes the book and leaves, leaving only the soft scent of his cologne and a feeling that nothing will ever be the same. That afternoon, Richard makes another decision that will lead him even deeper into the hole he is digging. He asks his driver, Mr. Benedict, to discreetly follow his father on his walks. Just to make sure he's safe, he justifies, but his voice sounds false even to his own ears. The report Mr. Benedict brings that night leaves him even more disturbed. Anthony doesn't just walk through the neighborhood streets. He has a specific destination. A simple house on the outskirts of the city where an older man lives. Who is this man? Richard asks. "Mr. Jack, sir. He used to work here at the house as a gardener a long time ago. He's retired now, lives alone." The name stirs something in Richard's memory. Mr. Jack, the gardener who tended the gardens when he was a child. A man with calloused hands and an easy smile who always had time to explain about plants or teach tricks for fishing in the lake behind the house. "What does my father do there?" "They just sit in the backyard, sir." They don't talk much, they just sit, looking at the empty field behind it. Sometimes Mr. Jack makes coffee, but most of the time it's just silence. Richard feels something churning in his stomach. Silence. His father goes there to sit in silence with an old gardener. Why does that bother him so much? That night, he searches the company archives and discovers something that shakes him even more. Mr. Jack wasn't just the gardener. He was specifically hired to look after Richard when he was a child. In his early years, while Anthony worked late building the financial empire, it was Mr. Jack who taught him to ride a bicycle, who comforted him when he fell, who told him stories before bedtime. The rage Richard feels is irrational, yet powerful, as if his childhood had been stolen from him, as if the affection that should have come from his father had been outsourced to employees. But along with the rage comes guilt, because he remembered Mr. Jack's affection, the man's infinite patience, the way his eyes lit up when Richard achieved something new. And now, decades later, it is with this man that his father chooses to spend his silent afternoons. Not with his rich and successful son, but with the retired gardener who has only stories and time to offer. What does this say about Richard? What does this say about the man he has become? The discovery changes everything. For 3 days, Richard avoids his father as if he were contagious. He eats at different times, leaves early for the office in the city, returns late when he is sure the old man is already asleep. But the screens remain on, the electronic eyes continue to watch, and the guilt grows like a tumor. On the 4th morning, something happens that forces him to face reality. Anthony is in the library, that immense room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, filled with books no one reads anymore. The morning sun streams through the tall windows, creating pillars of golden light, dancing with the dust suspended in the air. It is an environment that always had something sacred, a temple of knowledge built by generations. His father is sitting in his usual armchair, a book open on his lap, but Richard realizes he is not reading. He is looking directly at the camera installed in the upper corner of the room. Richard's heart stops for a second. Then it races. Anthony rises slowly, with the dignity that has always characterized him, and walks to an old cabinet. From there he takes out a white linen handkerchief, immaculate as his intentions. Then he returns to the camera and with delicate gestures covers the lens with the fabric. It wasn't rebellion. It was propriety. Richard feels as if he has been slapped. For the first time since he installed the system, he truly questions what he is doing. What is he looking for by observing every breath, every gesture, every moment of privacy of the man who gave him life? The answer that comes is uncomfortable: control. It had always been about control. As a child, Richard was afraid of his father's silence, of the long dinners where only the clinking of cutlery cut the air, of the hugs that never came, of the words of affection that remained stuck in the throat of the man, too busy to show emotion. Over time, that fear transformed into a need for approval, then a need to understand, and now a need to control. But control what? A 77-year-old man who visits retired gardeners and covers cameras with linen handkerchiefs. That afternoon, Richard makes a desperate decision. If the cameras cannot capture what he needs to know, perhaps a frank conversation can. When Anthony returns from his walk, his son waits for him in the living room. "Father, we need to talk." The old man sits in the opposite armchair, his hands clasped over his abdomen. His expression is serene, almost expectant, as if he knew this moment would come sooner or later. "I'm worried about you," Richard begins, but the words sound artificial even to him. "You've been different lately." Different how? Distant, confused sometimes, forgetting things, staring for hours at that portrait of Mom. Anthony smiles, and there is something sad in that smile. "Age comes to everyone, my son. It's nothing new, but I worry. You live alone in this immense house. You only have Celia to help. Perhaps it's time to think about alternatives." The word alternatives hangs in the air like poison. Both know what it means: nursing home, private nurses, the gradual loss of independence. "Do you think I can no longer take care of myself?" The question is asked without anger, only with genuine curiosity. "It's not that, Father. It's just that..." Richard struggles to find words that don't sound like betrayal. You deserve better care, professional attention, and you. The question comes out of nowhere, catching Richard off guard. What do you deserve? What do you mean? You work 16 hours a day. You have no family, no close friends. You live alone in an apartment that is more an office than a home. Perhaps you need care more than I do. The observation is sharp as an arrow. Richard feels his face flush. We're talking about you, not me, are we? There's a pause, and when Anthony speaks again, his voice is soft as a caress. Or are we talking about fear? Fear of what? Of the same fear that made you grow up so fast when your mother died. Of the fear of losing someone else, of truly being alone, of not being able to control life as you control your company. The words cut deep. Richard stands abruptly, walking to the window to hide the tremor in his hands. It's not about control. No, there's a pause, and when Anthony speaks again, his voice is soft as a caress. Then why did you install cameras throughout the house? The silence that followed is deafening. Richard turns slowly, his face pale as paper. Anthony observes him with eyes that show no surprise, only a deep sadness. You knew since the first day. Do you think someone lives 77 years without learning to notice when they are being watched? Richard feels small, like a child caught misbehaving. But worse than the shame is the realization that his father let it happen, allowed himself to be watched, recorded, monitored like an animal in a zoo. Why didn't you say anything? Because you needed to do this. Anthony stands and walks to his son. Just as I needed to let you do it. I don't understand. You spent your whole life trying to understand me through business meetings, financial reports, busy schedules. You thought you would know me through work, through success, through tangible things. But people are not spreadsheets, my son. They cannot be deciphered through data. Richard feels his throat tighten. Then how? Looking into their eyes, sharing silences, asking simple questions like, how are you? And then waiting for the real answer. His father places a hand on his shoulder. You installed cameras to see me, but you never learned to look at me. The phrase echoes in Richard's mind. If you still need to see, it's because you never learned to look. Now it makes sense. The cameras are coming out, Richard says, more to himself than to his father. Some will, Anthony agrees. Others you will keep because you're not ready to see me without them yet. And that's okay. Everyone has their own time to learn to trust. That night, Richard removes half the cameras. He leaves only two, one in the main hall and one in the hallway. It's a start. When he goes to sleep, for the first time in months, he sleeps deeply. And he dreams of his mother, young and smiling, saying something he cannot hear, but that fills his heart with a peace he hadn't felt in a long time. The change is subtle, but noticeable. In the days following the conversation, Richard notices a difference in the air of the house, as if something heavy had been lifted, allowing everyone to breathe better. Mrs. Celia comments that Anthony is more animated, that he even whistled while having breakfast. Richard also feels different, lighter perhaps, or perhaps just less guilty. But the real transformation happens on a rainy Thursday, when his father does something that leaves his son completely disarmed. Richard is in the office, reviewing contracts, when all the screens go dark at once. It's not a technical problem, it's intentional. Anthony has turned off the entire system at the source. The silence that settles in the office is almost deafening. After weeks of getting used to the constant hum of the microphones, to the amplified noises of the house, the absence of sound is disconcerting. Richard finds himself lost, as if he had suddenly gone blind. Panic hits first. What if something happened to his father? What if he fell, got hurt, needed help? How would Richard know? But before he can run after his father to question the decision, a voice echoes down the hallway. Richard! Come for dinner, my son. It's a simple invitation, but loaded with meaning. It's been months since they last dined together by choice, only by obligation or coincidence. It's been years since his father used that affectionate tone to call him. Richard descends the stairs with hesitant steps. The table is set for two, with the good china they only used on special occasions. Candles are lit, creating an intimate atmosphere that contrasts with the cold, silent dinners of recent times. Anthony is already seated, pouring red wine into 2 crystal glasses. "Sit down, my son. Today, Celia made that stew you liked as a child. It's true. The familiar scent awakens dormant memories. Richard at 10 years old, coming home from school and running to the kitchen to steal pieces of meat before dinner. His mother laughing and pretending to be stern, Mrs. Celia threatening with a wooden spoon, but always letting him taste. "You asked her to make it?" Richard asks, surprised. "I thought you needed a little childhood today. Being too adult is tiring, isn't it?" During dinner, Anthony tells stories. Not facts or data, but real stories about the day Richard was born and how he cried holding him for the first time. About the sleepless nights when the boy had a fever and how his mother walked around the room singing softly. About the first time Richard said "Daddy" and how it made him forget an important meeting. "Why didn't you tell me these things before?" Richard asks, his voice choked. "Because you never asked, and I never knew how to offer." It's a painful confession in its simplicity. 2 men who love each other, but never learn the language of affection. 2 hearts beating to the same rhythm, but in separate rooms. "Mr. Jack taught me something important," his father continues. "He said that affection isn't just beautiful words or tight hugs. Sometimes it's being close when someone needs you, even in silence. Sometimes it's planting a tree that will only bear fruit when you are no longer here to see it." Richard understands the message. Mr. Jack gave him what Anthony didn't know how to give. Simple presence, infinite patience, affection without demands. It wasn't abandonment, it was a division of responsibilities. 2 different men offering 2 different kinds of love to the same child. "Do you miss Mom?" The question escapes before Richard can think better. His father's face transforms. For a moment, the years disappear, and Richard sees the young man who fell madly in love with a woman who died too soon. Every day, she had a way of making simple things seem extraordinary. A breakfast turned into a feast, a bedtime story turned into an epic adventure. He smiles, but there are tears in his eyes. "You have that from her, you know? That capacity for intensity. Only you use it for work. She used it for love. I don't know how to love like she loved. No one does. Each person loves the way they can, with the tools they have. You love by controlling, organizing, solving problems. It's not wrong, it's just different." It's the first time in years Richard feels truly seen by his father. Not judged, not criticized, just understood. After dinner, they sit on the porch. The rain has created a natural curtain around the house, isolating them from the outside world. It's the first time in decades they've been like this, without an agenda, without rushing, without cell phones or documents mediating the conversation. "Father," Richard says when they arrive at the garage. "Yes, I love you." These are words that haven't passed between them for so long that they sound almost strange. But they are true, and that's what matters. "I love you too, my son. Always have. I was just waiting for you to be ready to hear it." That night, Richard finds Anthony in the main hall, sitting before his mother's portrait. But this time, he doesn't hide or pretend he hasn't seen him. He approaches and sits in the armchair beside him. "She was right, wasn't she?" he says, looking at the smiling woman in the photo. "About what?" "About us both deserving to be understood." Anthony smiles, and there is a peace on his face Richard had never seen before. "Your mother was always smarter than both of us put together." They stay there for a while, 2 different men finally learning the language each speaks. Outside, the distant sound of Mr. Benedict washing the car blends with the tick-tock of the antique clock in the hallway. The house returns to silence, but no longer empty. It's a silence full of mute understanding, of pardons granted and received, of love that finally found its way. When they go to sleep, Richard realizes he no longer feels the need to control. He doesn't need to know where his father is every minute, what he's thinking every moment. Trust, he finally understands, isn't about certainty. It's about choosing to believe even without guarantees. In his room, before falling asleep, Richard takes his mother's letter from the drawer, where he keeps it like a treasure. He rereads the last paragraph one more time, and for the first time, the words make complete sense. They succeeded. Father and son finally learned to teach each other the language each speaks. Some surveillance, he now understood, is merely a mirror of fear. And some silences are the deepest form of love. Downstairs, Anthony also prepares for sleep, smiling in silence. The lesson was finally complete. His son learned the difference between seeing and looking, between controlling and trusting, between watching and loving. It is the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. It is the beginning of a story that should have started long ago, but which is never too late to write when there is true love to guide the pen. In the silence of the house, only the wind whispers among the trees in the garden that Mr. Jack taught 2 generations to cultivate with patience and hope. If this story touched your heart, like, comment, and subscribe. Stories like this deserve to be remembered.